If the most important thing in your life is talking to other people's kids about homosexuality and transgenderism, stop calling yourself an educator. You are not an educator. You are a sex pervert. Not only should you be barred from close proximity to any child, not only should you be on the sex offender registry, not only should you probably be in prison, but I would be totally fine with imprisoning your pervert ass for the rest of your natural born life. Now, Florida passed a law saying that in kindergarten through third grade, you can't have freaky, weird, gay sex, transgender shit in the public school curriculum, which, if you're a normal person with a functioning moral center, you'll have one of two reactions to that. One is to say, okay, that seems fine, because freaky gay sex shouldn't be in any public school curriculum anyway. And the other is to lament the fact that people exist who behave in such dastardly, repugnant manners that such a law needs to exist. If you're a follower of the Democrat Party or the fake news media, but I repeat myself, you've heard them falling all over themselves these past few days, calling this law the Don't Say Gay bill, saying that it erases the existence of gay people if you can't gather the little 6-year-olds around and hold forth about all the freaky gay sex you had last night. You ever watch old Gladiator movies, Timmy? I mean, seriously, in only a slightly different context, when grown adults seek out small children to engage in sexual conversations, we arrest them and we throw their child-grooming predator asses into the state penitentiary. The kind of people who think they're having a great evening until Chris Hansen asks them to have a seat over there so we can review this chat transcript. So right here where you say, yes, I know you're 12. I think it's great that you're 12. I always wanted a 12-year-old. This is going to be awesome. Hip, hip, hooray for 12-year-olds. If you're 6 times 2, then you know what to do. So when you said that, you didn't think you were talking to an underage person? Nope. Figured she was 23, 24, something like that. Can I put my trousers back on now? Now, in the more hysterical nether reaches of the public sewer of popular leftism, especially celebrity Twitter, America's intellectual short bus, they are calling it the Don't Say Gay law, and according to our good friend White House Press Secretary Lady Ginger McFirebush of Alabaster Farms, the Florida law is, quote, a hateful attack that targets vulnerable kids. Now, back when I was in the age to be receiving public school sex education, which back in those days meant high school, it was right at the tail end of the epoch of where sex ed was say as little as possible, just explain the birds and the bees in the most euphemistic terms you can. And the object of the exercise is so that kids who are now becoming old enough to procreate should know the mechanics of how procreation happens, provided that job isn't being carried out at home by the parents like it should be. In other words, you explained just enough so that when a kid knocked up his girlfriend, he didn't have the option of throwing his hands up and saying, come on, nobody told me how babies get made. And then, the year after I graduate high school, Bill Clinton gets elected, and everything just goes apeshit all at once. His first Surgeon General, Jocelyn Elders, she's forced to resign after she casually remarks that we should teach kids how to masturbate in sex ed class. And I heard Jeffrey Toobin volunteered to be an expert guest lecturer in that class, but fast forward 30 years to today, while the Republican Party abandoned the culture war and looked the other way and droned on and on about free trade and tax policy, and now our kids live in a world of drag queen story hour, where they are bombarded on a daily basis not just with sexually explicit content, but explicit content that glorifies and celebrates non-normative expressions of sexual identity and behavior. If the most explicit thing you ever saw in school was a hot girl putting a condom on a banana when you were in 10th grade, the degree of sexual filth that gets shoveled into the minds of very small children by their teachers today is so far removed from your own experience that you don't even have a useful frame of reference. I've heard Jen Psaki say some pretty stupid stuff, but I was really gobsmacked when she characterized banning gay porn from the kindergarten classroom as targeting vulnerable kids. And you know why? Because she's absolutely right. This is all about targeting vulnerable kids, but the people doing the targeting are not the people passing the law. The people doing the targeting are the slimy sex pervert child grooming predator teachers who operate in the belief that a career in early childhood education confers an unalienable right to trans other people's kids and teach them how to do a Dutch oven. What's that? Jim Eagle informs me that in Holland, a Dutch oven is actually called a Maltese microwave. It's good to know. With a knowledge base like that, if this job doesn't work out, you could be a kindergarten teacher. I bet San Francisco would hire you in a snap. Just remember to open with the freaky gay sex stuff and talk about how much you really like being around little kids. From high atop the battlements of Castle Curmudgeon, where everybody always gets an A in high school masturbation class. Good evening, Mr. and Mrs. America, and all ships at sea. Welcome to the program. I am your eponymous host and humble servant. And in case you didn't receive the memo yet, all of the failures of Joe Biden's presidency, which began on 20 January 2021, are solely the fault of Vladimir Putin for invading Ukraine, which happened on 22 February 2022. And look, the timelines are a little bit iffy, okay? Just go with it. Now, Lady Ginger, she got herself in on the act. She stood up there and confidently asserted that there was no end in sight for, as she put it, the Vladimir Putin gas crisis. So there is, at least, albeit unintentionally, an admission there that the current situation is, in fact, a crisis. But don't you pay attention to that, because your favorite spectacularly unfunny regime-shilling late-night non-comedians are on the case. Steve Colbert, whose last funny joke happened back on Comedy Central somewhere, was nice enough to explain to us redneck bumpkin yokels that we should be more than happy to pay $7, $8, $15 for a gallon of gas, as long as it means holding Putin accountable. And why should we be happy to pay extra? Because Steve Colbert is happy to pay extra. Or at least he would be if he didn't make $16 million a year and drive a stupid Tesla. Could you picture Johnny Carson backhandedly mocking his audience for not being as rich as he is? Me either. But Johnny Carson was a decent and humble man, and he was also funny as hell. At the tail end of Carson's run, his show was funnier than Steve Colbert's show ever could dream of. Steve Colbert, Jimmy Kimmel, that douche nozzle on NBC whose name escapes me at the moment, all these mediocre tools who pull down 8-figure salaries to tell wretchedly unfunny jokes and carry water for the regime and the dear leader. They should all be ashamed of themselves. Comedians are supposed to provide one of the guardrails in a free and open society. Politicians have to restrain themselves because if they go too far over the deep end, the comedians will mock them mercilessly for it, and they will be embarrassed and chastened. At least, that is how it used to work. Now, we get dancing syringes and monologues that may as well have been written by the DNC comms director. And the trained seals in the studio audience, they laugh when the laughter sign comes on, they applaud when the applause sign comes on, and you're left with what exactly? An empty, hollow, soulless, regime-approved, big-tech, oligarch-approved social engineering operation masquerading as a comedy show? Where the laughter is so forced it sounds like the audience all has pistols aimed at their heads? But those assholes are just a few of the members of this big, wonderful cavalcade of industrialized bullshit. The industrialized bullshit industrial complex, if you will. When there are big, stupendous lies to tell and precious little time in which to tell them, well, that's an operation that requires all hands on deck. So it's been wall-to-wall this week, even more closely coordinated than it usually is, with every commentator on every network creepily using the exact same words and phrases, and the words and phrases add up to this. Everything about your life has gotten worse since Joe Biden became the president, and it is all Vladimir Putin's fault. And sometimes Donald Trump. But let me be clear, Mr. and Mrs. America. None of the disastrous, calamitous things that have happened these past 14 months is Joe Biden's fault. And if you think it is, then you have probably been reading too much Russian disinformation. And you have to feel bad for Joe Biden. It must be frustrating to be such a great president, such a very capable statesman and leader, a man of such wide-ranging talents, the power of whose written prose is surpassed only by his soaring oratorical feats. But to have your greatness confounded at every turn, either by the bad orange man or the bad Putin man, it must be incredibly frustrating. But I've noticed that something's missing here. Amidst all the same standard crap in which the military-industrial complex traffics when they're trying to kick off a good old-fashioned war. When we went into Vietnam, they said the Vietnamese people are not our enemy. When we went into Afghanistan, they said the Afghan people are not our enemy. When we went into Iraq, both times, they said the Iraqi people are not our enemy. When we intervened in Syria and Libya, they said the same thing. These people are not our adversary. They're living under the oppression of an autocratic dictator. We just want to swap out the leadership so these people can be free to go about their lives in peace. They always say it every single time. Right up until this time, that is. We haven't heard one single person in the government say, the Russian people are not our enemy. In fact, they seem to be saying quite the opposite thing, or if not saying it outright, then at least heavily implying it. They're saying, yep, we're going to crash the ruble, we're going to wreck the Russian economy completely and totally, we're going to leave their asses bankrupt and destitute. Every big U.S. company has already stopped doing business with Russia, and anyone in Russia, and some of these responses, they don't have any effect on Putin or the Russian government or the Russian military. They seem to just be capricious attacks upon the Russian people themselves, most of whom are totally blameless in the current situation, many of whom do not support the actions of their government. And since when do we do stuff like this? Because this is rather outside my lived experience as an American. This is not the way America normally acts in situations like this. The such and such people are not our enemy is something I have never heard our government not say when we were in a moment of escalating hostility with some potential foreign adversary. You know what else I never heard before up until about 5 minutes ago? I never heard any greeniac climate cultist say that not only do we have to transition away from oil and gas, but we have to stop using them before we have even come close to exhausting our supply. And this was never a feature of anti-oil evangelism ever before. And will someone tell me when the left started thinking that natural gas is evil? Because I seem to remember it was only like 12 or 15 years ago when the lefty environmentalists were touting natural gas as the clean, green fuel of the future. Did I just imagine that? The entire crux of the argument for the anti-oil, pro-green energy crowd used to be that crude oil is a finite resource. We will one day run out of it, so we need to start ahead of time developing alternative modes of power generation so that it doesn't cause a global catastrophe when all the crude oil is tapped out. And that's a perfectly reasonable position, which is grounded in objective reality. Nobody ever said we should proactively stop using oil altogether when it's still the best fuel source we have, when there's still plenty of it in the ground, when the technology for extracting it keeps improving, as does our ability to burn it cleanly. And nobody ever said we have to quit natural gas cold turkey as well. The environmentalist position didn't used to be predicated on the idea that oil is bad and evil and we just shouldn't use it. It was predicated on the belief, the fact, that oil is finite and we should use it, but we should prepare and make good contingency plans for the day when we exhaust the available supply. But that was before the environmental movement morphed into the climate cult. When it was just the environmental movement, it cared about being based in science and some type of pragmatism. It was not anti-capitalist or anti-industry or anti-human, at least not to an absurd extent. Since it became the climate cult, it's become very much all of those things. And it's animated now by anti-human thinking that you'll hear the true believers. They sound exactly like the members of a nihilistic suicidal death cult. Like they're just waiting for somebody to pass out the purple Kool-Aid so they can pay the earth god the ultimate tribute by taking one more filthy human parasite off of it. And it's bad enough when large numbers of people in the general public are thinking such stupid things. But when the people who are charged with running your country's government, managing its natural resources, and charting the course of its energy policy, when those people are committed practitioners of this magical religious thinking, this fundamentalist neo-pagan doomsday cult, and they seek to advance policies that are informed by that thinking, then our country becomes no different as a practical matter from Saudi Arabia or Iran or Afghanistan. The people who are in charge are unhinged religious fanatics, and the rights of the citizenry only exist within the boundaries of that fanaticism. Either way, whether officially or otherwise, you have a state religion, which inhibits the effective functioning of the society at large. But at least the Saudis and the Afghans and the Iranians only have one state religion. We've got two, or maybe three, I guess. We've got the neo-pagan climate change doomsday cult. We've got the Holy Apostolic Church of the Blessed Public Health Bureaucrat, and we've got the Church of Radical Leftist Identitarianism, which teaches us that you're not defined by the content of your character, but rather by the color of your skin and the freakiness of your sexual proclivities. And the freakier the better, obviously. Because if you're a pansexual, two-spirit, gender-fluid unicorn fairy who drives a car powered by magical leprechaun farts, then you enjoy automatic moral superiority over any practitioner of heterosis normativity. We don't think of ourselves as a theocracy, but can you look me in the face and tell me we're not one? When you approach our country's leaders as a humble supplicant and you say, "Dear leaders, look, I generally mind my own business. I don't ask for much, but I just can't afford to pay $80 for a tank of gasoline, especially not after these last 2 years of the economy being artificially throttled. These gas prices they're going to ruin my ability to make a living if something isn't done to bring them down. So do you think maybe just temporarily, in spite of your sincerely held religious beliefs, we could increase domestic production just a little bit? Can you please set aside your climate fanaticism for 5 minutes when the people of the country really desperately need your help?" And what's the response from Joe Biden's government? No. Shut up and buy a Tesla, asshole. They don't want to stop the harm because they think the harm is a good thing. In the context of their religious fervor, they think they are saving you from yourself. They think the harm they inflict on you and your family is for your own good. They don't even see it as a harm, really. If high gas prices destroy your small business, if you wind up losing your house, if your family has to relocate to a tiny apartment and can no longer afford to own a car, they see that as a net positive. That's a cause for celebration. You're no longer taking up all that land you used to take up selfishly. Your cars and trucks are no longer belching out carbon emissions and making our precious Earth Mother weep uncontrollable tears of sadness. You didn't even know this was the brave new world that you wanted to live in. You needed Joe Biden and his team of conscientious social engineers to turn you against your will into the best version of yourself. Now get your butt into your tiny closet-sized bedroom and consume that mainstream media entertainment content like there is no tomorrow. That is your real function in life. All that freedom and self-determination you thought you had, it was just distracting you from your true purpose. You were not truly happy when you had that house and those cars and what you thought was a loving, well-adjusted family. You were really just a bunch of planet-murdering, selfish a-holes who needed to be saved from yourselves. So sit alone in your tiny room and enjoy your newfound sense of moral worth because you've earned it, buddy. And finally, last thing for tonight, the Russia-Ukraine war and the specter of a potential Russia-United States war has been such a hot topic of discussion these last couple weeks now that it may have escaped your attention that the China virus has seemingly melted away, which it always inevitably had to do. But when that happened, there needed to be another object of widespread public hysteria close at hand. Otherwise, well, when all the masks came off and all the mandates were dropped, if there wasn't a new thing for people to freak out about, well, they might start asking difficult questions that the government has not much interest in answering. Questions like, what benefit did we gain from wearing ridiculous face diapers for 2 years? What benefit did we gain from crushing our healthy, vibrant economy? What benefit did we gain from all the vaccine mandates and social distancing and school closures? But all those questions really add up to the same question. Was the response proportionate to the threat? Because remember, when they imposed the lockdowns and shut down all the economies, it was when the best available computer models were saying there was going to be a 3 to 5% mortality rate. Then, of course, the real mortality rate wound up being less than 0.5%. But the response was never adjusted accordingly. All we got was more top-down, brute force authoritarianism for its own sake. They are thanking God right now for the Ukraine war because an honest conversation about the government response to the China virus is just about the last conversation they want to be having right now. And we will leave it there for tonight. Thank you for watching. See you Friday. Have a pleasant tomorrow. Do not comply. Get off my lawn.